In this episode, we will talk about coaching, lessons, and stencils. We will discuss the types of coaching you will use and how coaching a non-speaker to type is like learning to dance. We will discuss board placement or how the communication partner holds the stencil for the typer. We will talk about what materials you need to begin and how lessons use keywords. We will discuss why you need to start with 3 stencils and how to make the stencils show fewer letters, if necessary. Types of coaching.
Judy, I would like to ask you about the level or hierarchy of coaching.
Okay.
We have parents just going to start out, and so just if you could briefly explain the different types of ways they're going to help coach the motor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there's more invasive coaching and less invasive coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, eventually there's no coaching.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now going back to my tennis analogy. When you first pick up a tennis racket, a tennis coach may come and literally put their hands on your hands.
Yes.
To show you how to hold it and how to swing your racket. Okay, we call that hand over hand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is your most invasive coaching. There are some students who require it in the beginning because they can't form a point, they can't even properly hold a pencil. So in the beginning, I may have to use hand over hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's not typical, it's not even common, but I just want to bring it up in case there's a parent out there who finds that they absolutely need to do it in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you can stop touching your child, you will stop touching your child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the second, in terms of going from most invasive to least invasive, would be what I call an auditory cue. Okay, again, some students really have trouble moving their eyes on command. Okay, again, remember dyspraxis. So there's occasions on which a child is really, their eyes are frozen. It's called fixation. It's a function of the dyspraxia where students just keep looking at something and they can't get their eyes to move. Mm-hmm. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll give an auditory cue. Okay, again, I do not usually have to do this, but I want to put it in the video just in case anybody needs it. Some child is stuck over here. They cannot get off the top corner. I might give a little auditory tap on the board. Get your eyes down here. You hear it? You hear it? Sometimes I'll even click. Get your eyes over here. Okay, again, more invasive. Those two I don't commonly use. Again, I just wanted them in the video.
Mm-hmm.
The most common kinds of coaching we use are what we call, number 1, a vague hand gesture. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to give the student essentially a moving target. I'm never, ever, ever going to point to the letter, by the way. Put that in there. Okay, if we're pointing to the letters, we're completely negating what we're trying to do, is to teach them to independently get to the letter. So a vague hand gesture. I'm going to hold the board up here just so you can clearly say, here's my S. Okay, I'm going to be bringing the board down and I'm going to be waving them up in the top left corner, down in the bottom left corner, up in the top right corner, down in the bottom right corner, maybe in the middle, up, down. So you see these big hand gestures. I'm using my hand, flat hand, never a point, in order to get them to be able to follow my hand to where that letter is. Now again, as soon as possible, we drop it.
Mm-hmm.
It is good to drop hand over hand, auditory tapping and hand gestures as soon as possible because you don't want us to get used to that level of support.
Next is I call it a direction prompt. I'm going to tell the student exactly where the letter is, okay? So if I wanted Elizabeth, let's say, to get to that S, okay? It's in the top right-hand corner. I'm telling her exactly where it is, and up and get it.
Go ahead.
S.
There.
Okay. So, and then next down, where we're really starting to get towards the student is really starting to get to that point where they're able to get to letters with much less prompting. And I teach parents all the time, by the way, Ginny, that you don't ever use one prompt.
Yes.
I'm using all of these, and I'm going to be teaching Ginny to use all of these.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Maybe not the first two. Okay? Maybe not hand over hand, maybe not an auditory prompt. But when I'm first starting to work with a student, I'm constantly mixing my prompts up. Come back to that in a moment. Let me explain the least invasive. Okay, which is a vague word. Look, 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 look. Find it. Shift your eyes. What I'm doing is I'm saying you're not there yet. You
There's-
have
there's
to
one-
keep looking.
There's another one that I've seen you do too, Judy, which is that where you make your voice like a little sing-songy to like keep it
I
in a
do, but
rhythm.
that's a more advanced skill.
Yes, but it is a prompt.
It is, and I use my voice in a lot of different ways, actually. So I guess I could give a brief description. She's right, I also do singing. The reason is because it helps students to achieve a good rhythm of spelling. Some students will spell too fast, some students will spell too slowly. So it's almost like a drum beat, like A and B, look, C and D, good, keep going at this pace. So I'm giving them a rhythm to keep their hand moving at a good pace. I also do other subtle prompts, which are things like up, down. So I have many prompts I've developed for myself that I find work with students. Eventually, of course, it will simply look like, hi Elizabeth,
Hi, Elizabeth.
H and I and J, U, D, Y, where I'm not prompting at all.
That was a lot to absorb about coaching. Please know you will hear more in other videos. You will have time to practice and learn them.
Okay, so most of you will be starting with the hand prompt, the vague gesture, the direction prompt in your first lessons until you're very comfortable with your direction prompt and your hand prompt. At that point, I typically will start having parents prompt with a mixture of those, trying to pull out the hand as rapidly as possible. And then also, and getting in that continual, I call it patter. It's a form of coaching in which we keep our voice going in order to keep their hand moving.
I think of it a little bit like dancing.
Learning to dance.
Very like dancing.
It's like you're trying to get into a rhythm with your speller and typer.
Yes.
It's got to be like they sort of overcome their inability to initiate a movement because
That's
you're
correct.
sort of helping them get started with your voice.
It's exactly like, it's 100% dancing.
Yes.
It really is, because again, when the music is playing, you
Yes.
find that your body moves, and it moves in a rhythm. So yes, very much so, Ginny. What I'm doing with that, what I call patter, is I am coaching, saying, and we're going, and we're moving, and let's keep going, and sometimes I'll even chant, and top left corner, and move your eyes down, 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 find it on the right, and up, 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 look, look, look,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different kinds of subtle prompts, which we can cover, I guess, in more detail in the future.
Board placement.
But just so you know, your first times, several weeks probably, sitting with your student, you're going to be doing nothing more than working on board placement, which means that locking that board in, I make people flex their muscles so that it is really still. Okay, with that, bifurcating your board right there, tabletop, it doesn't move. In front of the student's hand, their dominant hand, if they're a righty, okay?
Right, so even if it's a right-handed or left-handed person, same thing, but put it in front of their dominant
Correct.
hand.
It goes in front of the dominant hand.
Please notice that Judy is sitting on my right side facing me. It is important that you always sit on the right side even if the student is left-handed.
Okay, it doesn't go in front. Okay, it doesn't float. Okay, don't do what a lot of parents do and start moving the board back and forth, up and down to sort of. We don't want this.
No.
We're trying to teach them to get to the letter themselves.
Board placement is important for our success. Please be confident that you can hold the stencil still and coach our bodies to hit the letters. What you need to begin.
Okay, so there's a few things that you'll see on the table here. I think it's a good place to start. Okay, so number one, I just have an ordinary pad of paper. Okay, on this I'm going to be writing what I ask Elizabeth and what she answers. We call it a transcript. Really, it's just a record of what your non-speaker is doing. In the beginning, it's not going to be that interesting, but believe me, it's going to get interesting. Okay, I also have a sort of half-folded piece of paper. Call this a keyword list. when you're teaching typing for communication, you're going to be using lessons. There are free lessons available in different places, including at Communication for All. Lessons are constructed in such a way as to guide you through the process of teaching your non-speaker. Within each paragraph, these are essentially stories. Let me just start by saying that. They're stories, or we learned something interesting. For example, I wrote this one, and it's about the current wars between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison.
Lessons and keywords.
You'll see a paragraph. In that paragraph, you're going to see some capitalized letters, words. They're called keywords.
Please spell all of the keywords onto your keyword list as you read the lesson as Judy demonstrates here.
It is not melodramatic. MELODRAMATIC. And you saw me writing it on the keyword list. So think about this as your blackboard. This is you're telling your non-speaker, pay attention to this. I'm probably going to ask you a question about it shortly. Okay, and so we have my lesson, I have my keyword list, and I have my pad for the transcript. I also have an ordinary pencil.
Use a pencil because the writing makes a sound that keeps our attention.
And finally, I have my stencils.
Board placement.
To start with your non-speaker, you're going to be sitting at a right angle with your body at a right angle, sitting up straight. Okay, I want you to think about your own arm being crooked at a 90-degree angle. Elizabeth, you'll notice, I'm perpendicular to her. She is sitting at a 90-degree angle, sitting up nice and straight, feet on the floor. She's backed away from the table because I need to have room to have the boards fit in front of her.
I know sitting still can be challenging. You don't have to sit while the lesson is being read. You can walk around the room or sit on the floor. You need to sit as best as you can while spelling the words.
Placement of your boards, you will be holding them so that the tabletop bifurcates the board. Right there. Okay, it's not in front of her eyes, it's not floating all over. It is, once it's in place, it doesn't move. So it's held, brought down, halfway through the thing here, and then we will be working on coaching Elizabeth, although she obviously knows how to do it.
Yes.
But for the sake of the video, I will be coaching her to get her eyes and hands to work together to get to the letter of her choice.
Why start with 3 stencils?
So Judy, I think it's really important that people understand that they don't just go right to all 26 letters.
Right.
That you really need to start with the stencils that are broken up. Tell us about why that is.
There's a lot less information on each board. Okay, this is really difficult for somebody with dyspraxia. Dys meaning doesn't work. Praxia refers to the system of praxis, so volitional motor movement. So that is, I'm thinking about doing something, I'm willing myself to do something, now I can't do it because it doesn't work properly. So what we have all been witnessing in our non-speakers, and by the way, I'm a mother too. Yes. Okay, all these years is we're trying to teach them and they're not doing what we're telling them. And we're assuming then perhaps, I guess my child must be cognitively disabled because they don't seem to understand what I'm doing. That is not the case. What it is that they understand perfectly, but they're not thinking about doing it so they can. Which is why I point out to parents all the time, all of the guys smile normally until we tell them to pose for a picture. And then they're distorting their face in every which way because they're thinking about smiling, so now they can't smile. So the reason we use these boards is because there's much less information. Dyspraxia heavily affects the eyes. And therefore, it's very difficult for them to get their eyes and hands to coordinate, to get up, let's say, to the S, if they wish to get to the S.
Stencils with fewer letters.
One of the things I do have on the table, just to briefly show you, if your child is really struggling in the beginning, even with only 8 letters on the board, you could tape a piece of cardboard onto the board, which you can then flip up and down, so there's only 4 letters for them to work on in the beginning.
You will move through the different devices at your own pace. Don't rush. In this episode, we hope you learned the types of coaching, from most invasive to least invasive. Hand-over-hand guiding the typer's hand to the letter. This type of coaching is rarely used. Auditory cues include tapping the stencil and snapping fingers. Hand gestures waving the direction of the letter. Verbal direction includes up, down, left, and right. General coaching includes get it and keep going. Learning to type is like learning to dance in a rhythm together. What you need to begin: a lesson, pencil, pad of paper, and 3 stencils. Capitalized keywords in lesson are written on the keyword list. The board is held steady in front of the dominant hand at the table level. Your movement exercises for this episode are to do these 2 intentional movement workouts you can find on YouTube. Click on the links in the description below to access the videos. Please do these exercises over the next several days until they become fluid movements. Here it is. Your moment of zen.
Spell. Tomorrow.
In the future,
Yes.
I
Me.
in the future I want to go to college. I want to go to college and major in history.